I could say confidently that this episode is going to break the internet. Welcome to
Hey,
Cloudflare Awareness Day.
Awareness Day.
Oh, today's been a day. So today we're going to cover quite a few topics. We're going to talk about market and AI dynamics, what they mean for leaders. We're going to talk what kind of CISOs really survive this moment and this environment, where the archetypes, how does accountability work, reporting lines. We're going to cross through how to sell security outcomes in the room of CFOs, COOs, and product leaders, and how leaders can build their voice. And so they're not just reacting to the next wave, but they're helping shape that. So for that, I'm really thrilled to have a friend join the podcast today. We've got a true force of cybersecurity and B2B SaaS leadership. This is Amelia Forrest Kaye. Amelia, known as AFK, is known as a fractional chief customer officer, an executive advisor who spent nearly 2 decades shaping the post-sales customer success engines at companies like Expel, Solve Security, Tanium. She's the person that CISOs and CEOs and founders call when they need to turn customer obsession from a buzzword into something of a measurable strategy. So Amelia, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
I was going to say, I don't know who you're announcing, but she sounds great. Could I go meet her? Like that?
So we're glad to have you on here tonight. So thank you. So the first thing, I've got a docket that I wanted to go through today, but going on the
tear it up after today.
Cloudflare. I mean, let's talk about concentration risk. Stu and I have talked about this in the podcast before. It's a great reminder around this. A few weeks ago, we had AWS East go down and was degraded for a while. We had Cloudflare have a sustained outage. So here's the question I have for you, AFK. How do we think about working with customers, or as a customer, how do you think about working with these vendors when there's an outage like this? Because it must be a perceived loss of trust when you have an outage on such a critical provider like AWS or Cloudflare.
Yeah. So I think about this a lot in terms of what should you expect from your vendors and what should your vendors be doing to treat you with ethical care during these times. And I think the general direction is to assume less technical ability and understanding of the tech stack and the fragile and brittle ecosystem we all rely on. So there's this delicate balance of, okay, it wasn't us, but we're affected by it. And I see most vendors fail at that. And the ones that I think do well mix the right component of, I'll call it training on their tech stack and what other vendors, other platforms they rely on, with this idea of we are impacted by this thing that is impacting a lot of other people, with this idea of, but no, we're not shifting blame. We take full accountability for your degraded service, and we're going to try to help you get through this. And meanwhile, we're going to teach you some things throughout this process. And I think most it's either like, hey, look over there, those guys screwed it up. It's not our fault. Or it's, shoot, we're getting blamed for something that isn't entirely our responsibility, but we might as well fall on our sword. And then our brand awareness, our own trust is degraded. So I guess I'd say I haven't seen anyone do it super effectively, but as a customer, I'd say ask your vendors the tough questions. Learn the things you need to know to understand who should you be putting your trust in and how transparent are they with you about what just occurred.
So in that example, it's like, if we're running a business and we're dependent on a service provider, and that service provider is dependent on Cloudflare has an outage, you would expect that first one, even though they didn't technically have a mistake, they're dependent on someone, you would expect them to take full ownership of that and just be like, yep, we built an architecture that was too over-reliant on this service provider, on our fault. Is that what you're getting at?
No, I'm saying it's a much grayer line than that. It's this delicate balance of, we're going to help fix this. We're going to take accountability for the impact that you've experienced in your service. And we're going to teach you that some of this wasn't our fault. So we're not going to point fingers per se, but we're not going to fully fall on our sword either, because I think helping to educate users on that nuance makes the whole system better, helps us all realize that, yeah, I shouldn't, like granola went down on the AWS outage. I use granola all the time. I could have been mad at granola, but instead, and by the way, shout out granola if you guys are listening, I love you. But I went to their status page. Some people don't even know that a status page is a place that they can go and subscribe and gather data on. I looked up the KB articles that could have been written, knowledge base articles. So I think this is the opportunity to both accept some responsibility, but also educate people on the tech stack in which your product is built and the implications that every layer in it bring to the user experience.
Fourth party risk is something that we've been talking a lot about. It seems to be a lot more prevalent. I mean, with AWS, we didn't even mention Microsoft also was down fairly recently. Like it's everybody, it seems like everybody's turn. Like GCP must be sat there going, all right, we're up. They at least have one free pass given everybody else had to go. But I do think it's something that, you know, we've barely figured out third party risk. We've tried for a very long time. I don't know that we've nailed it. But the long and the short of it now is there are not many businesses that are set up on their own infrastructure. We are so very reliant on AWS, Cloudflare, like whoever it may be, Akamai, like it could be anyone. And to your point, AFK, like no one really knows who is integrated with what and why. And I wonder if there is a better way to publicize this and communicate it. But also, like, we live in an echo chamber of incredibly, like, connected, smart, tech savvy people. My mom was trying to call me on WhatsApp earlier and didn't get why it wouldn't work. And she's like, I think the internet's broken, which by theory, it is. But like, if I'm like, yeah, mom, it's Cloudflare, she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I do think like the impact, whilst it's easy for the ecosystem that we're operating in for us to go, yeah, like, of course, this integration piece there. And if that's out, that's out. Whereas some people are like, why can't I order my Cheesecake Factory? Like, I just can't get it done. I don't know why that came to my head. I'm a big Cheesecake Factory guy. But people don't know how to piece this together. And they do just go straight to, hey, this doesn't work. Either I'm going to go to a competitor immediately if it's like an e-commerce situation. So there is that lack of, like, we do have a lack of patience. And I do think we have a lack of education, again, to that, I'm trying to sound like superior here from it, but like it's for our less tech savvy customer or people influence, like I don't know that we do a great job of explaining the situation.
So I love that. So AFK, I heard that like when we have these outages, we should kind of flip the narrative on its head a little bit, and we should use this lean in as an opportunity to actually proactively build trust. Like you can be clear, you can help relationships. You can help the relationship by putting in those knowledge-based articles, having status pages, doing the communication, using it as a moment of education, kind of the empathetic education. I think that's really cool. I also heard, Stu, you need to call your mom more.
Probably true. Probably true. I also think like PR teams, I think like where do most people get this news? They probably go to X or Twitter, Instagram or whatever. I'm not on X because it's a weird place. Like plenty of people are. I had to delete it. But I think it's PR and crisis management not necessarily handled in the most appropriate way, at least from what I've seen and read. I actually, from outside looking in, I think Cloudflare for the most part have eaten it and done the very best. Like they weren't down for a long, long time. They were down for a bit. And I've seen comments from the CTO, CEO that remind me somewhat of CrowdStrike, like in terms of how they handled it. And look, I mean, George is a genius. Like he spun that up. And I think a lot of people felt very confident to buy CrowdStrike stock that day because of who he is and how they handled that situation. It seems like Cloudflare are handling it in it. Like it's not a great situation, but they're handling it with as much class and decorum as you'd expect from a very good company.
Yeah, do you guys, a brief plug for something we talk about in customer-facing roles all the time is the service recovery paradox. Have you guys crossed that?
Tell us more, yeah.
Yeah, so let's assume that a customer feels neutral about you. This is neutral. And then something like an outage or a really bad bug or something else hits, and you go all the way down here. Okay, so now you're -10. Companies that go the extra distance to be like, we are so sorry. Here's what we're going to do to fix this. Here's how we're going to educate you. Here's the discounts we're going to provide. Here's how we're going to make you feel seen and heard. And here's what we're going to do differently going forward. And no, it's not a bunch of PR bullshit. Like we're actually going to do these things and you have our word. Then actually you don't end up back at zero, which is where the neutral, you end up in the positive land.
Yeah.
So people that take, I mean, again, it's like a classic crisis management. If you take the negative and you do react to it in the best possible way, the customer ends up being more positively inclined towards you.
I love that. I've got a personal anecdote that totally proves that point of like never wasting a good crisis. And that is I had plumbers out here last year to fix something. And there was a connection to the back of the fridge and it had broken off and the floor had like flooded and we turned off the water. They came, they cleaned it all up, and they fixed it. Well, they didn't fix it. They connected it, but they connected it poorly. And so we wake up the next day, and now the kitchen's really flooded. And those guys came up and they said, okay, look, we can't prove we made the mistake, but it looks like it might have been us. So we're just going to handle everything. So they not only fixed the problem, they brought in they paid for the professional cleaners to come through the whole thing. We dried out the floors. It was a total pain in the rear, but we had floor mats out there for weeks, drying things out. But guess who I still use as my plumber? Right? Because
and you tell your friends,
if these guys screw up, they're going to come back again and fix it properly.
My anecdote is far more about the bar I used to drink in when I was younger, so we won't dig in, but they overcharged me once. I never paid for a drink again. Same situation. But I also look at our customer
Before
base,
that one, by the way.
That's it.
Use my...
I look at our customer base, and the customers that are most loyal to us is the ones who we've gone through a challenging moment, and that means we either dive into a situation, get on a flight, eat it, but make them feel seen and heard. And some of my strongest relationships in honestly all walks of life, like you look at your personal relationships as well, like most things go through a point of challenge and you feel stronger on the other side of it. And going back to what CrowdStrike did very well is they knew they fucked up, right? Like let's be clear. They knew they did. Like first of all, they fixed it. Like that's the most important part is they fix it. But to go, hey, we understand, this is on us. We're not just going to go, okay, like AWS, for example, we might bill you back for a little bit of what you're out, but there's a much bigger cost, right? If you're down for a day, it's not what you pay for that. It's reputation, it's actual customer base, it's whatever. Like you might lose customers during that time. I think kind of when we talked about it, it was there's two major betting sites in the US, and one of them is DraftKings and one of them is FanDuel. One of them was on AWS, and gamblers gamble, right? And if they can't get on one, they went to the other one because it was open, because that's a different challenge in of itself. But customer acquisition is hard, but once you're on a platform, you tend to stay if it's convenient. So if you went from betting site A to betting site B, you probably didn't go back when it came up. So you just lost a customer. And that, like, however much you're spending on cloud storage, it doesn't necessarily translate to the lifetime cost of a customer. And I feel like the businesses that handle it well realize there's a bit more than just there was an outage situation, and that this reputational damage can cause a lot more to businesses. George, as an example, handled it great. And again, from the immediate crisis management I've seen from the Cloudflare team, yeah, it's a bad look today, but I think they're handling it in the best possible way.
All right. So I think we really covered fourth party risk. And I love, AFK, how you're talking about we can use these moments to truly go deep and build trust with customers. And you were saying, Stu, the worst, when you go through a struggle with somebody, you can come out the other side and you have these incredible, long-lasting relationships because you went through the crucible together. I think that's a great point. So I want to change gears slightly and talk about something different, because over the last 2 weeks, I'm seeing these emerging signals, and I think they're sitting in tension. I want both your reactions to this. So kind of like on one side, where we're seeing threat actors using AI, right, to bring it back to that. We've got Anthropic. They just published their November threat report, where they're describing these Chinese state-linked group, the GTG 1002, that use Claude to orchestrate these intrusions across nearly 30 different organizations. And we discussed this extensively last week with Damian Lukey. And anyone who wants to go deep in that, check out last week's episode. It's a really good deep dive. But for me, the key takeaway was that Claude was completed 80 to 90% of the detailed work in that campaign, everything from recon to lateral movement. And the human operators, they're really focused on just the strategy and then these few manual steps, these deliberate breakpoints, which is exactly kind of what we hoped defenders were going to get from AI. But we're seeing the adversaries doing that. Now, that's one side of the coin. On the other side, you've got Gartner, who's reporting to Reuters this week that more than 40% of all these agentic AI projects will be canceled by 2027. And the reason they're giving is because the costs are high and the business value is unclear. So in the same breath, they're predicting that these 15% of day-to-day work decisions and a third of enterprise applications are going to embed agentic capabilities by 2028. You've got one hand where threat actors are seeing the benefit of the technology. You've got the other hand where the enterprises are saying it's too costly, we're not getting the results we want, so they're going to, 40% of them are going to cut away. And then you have this third dimension in here where we're seeing, if we look at the reports from IANS, from this Articos data that just came out, where they reported on CFO Dive, they showed that cybersecurity budgets only grew by 4% this year. And then for the first time in 5 years, cybersecurity's share of IT spend fell from 11.9 to 10.9%. So we have AI boosted adversaries. We've got this agentic hype cycle for all these projects happening in the enterprise, which 40% aren't going to survive. And we got this macro pictures where CFOs are being super cautious and defenders aren't seeing those dollars. Considering all of those three data points, I think this is really interesting moments. AFK, what's your perspective on this? How do you think leaders, because you work so much with security leaders and executives, how do we navigate this triangle, this Bermuda triangle of not a happy place at the moment? What do you think the market is actually demanding from security and really customer facing leaders right now?
Yeah, so before I answer that, like a couple of hot takes would just make me sort of laugh about how ridiculous all of this is. The first is we went from, code injections to be the thing to prompt injections to be the thing, and now the orchestration layer is being attacked. And I know both of you do a lot of work trying to find the deeper and deeper root of these things. And I think we've gone deeper this time than we have in the past, or at least it's public now. And so, yeah, that should raise alarm bells. It should also demonstrate to us that AI can be a bad guy and a good guy, and we have to be thoughtful about that. Another thing, Connor, that you and I sort of joked about last week, which I find also funny, is how many customers of mine continue to invest so much money in insider threat campaigns, like the compliance and security trainings, click the button, do the thing, and prevent phishing and spear phishing and all of that. And it's like these LLMs, these AI agents love clicking malicious links. Why can't we build security awareness training? Why can't we build insider threat training for the AI bots themselves?
I actually think that's a real market need. I have a whole thing we'll talk about at some point around like Claude code rules, so it stops spitting out vulnerable code, and you basically need security awareness training for your LLM. But yeah, so training your LLM to stop clicking on phishing links is going to be a thing.
Did we just start a
Imagining these-
business?
No, because we'd have to be at a bar to do that.
That's
If we're at a
true.
bar,
All
then it would be
businesses,
legit.
yeah, that's true.
I just imagine it's like, all right, everyone, it's time for your annual security training. All right, little bots, don't click that. No, it's really tempting, but don't. Anyway, all right. So hot take aside, I want to actually more formally answer your question because it was a good one. And I really like this Bermuda Triangle analogy. What I think is interesting about all of this AI hype is it tends to pendulum swing from like AI is notoriously bad, stop everything, and AI is the future, go all in. And there's no real talk about the middle ground. And when I think about the middle ground, I think about basic change management principles of bringing in tools into your environment and doing the due diligence you need to do on those tools. So I start with the fundamentals. And this is like, as I think about selling, or if you're a vendor and you're selling to your client, what are some things on the client side or the customer side that should probably be there? Number one, there's a bought-in leader who is going to sponsor this either financially or from a brand perspective or both. Ideally, both. You have a financial leader and you have someone who's like your executive champion who's going to help champion this project. Number two, there's a clear why. This is why we're doing it. This is what we expect the impact to be. This is why we purchased this tool. And this is what we expect in the case of, AI vendor X. This is what we expect to achieve with them. Number three, there's some clear, tangible steps that everyone has to take to achieve the why. And it's not some big nebulous, like become 42% more productive. It's very tangible. We need you to do these things to get enabled. Okay, now you're enabled, and now expect the results to occur over the next couple of days, weeks, months, etc. The lack of demonstrating material outputs, the lack of the sort of initial thesis as to why we bought this and what we expected to do, and then the lack of basic change management. Okay, if you classic trade-offs in a company, when you make a decision to go forward on this, you're probably going to have to say no to these three other things. So what are we saying no to? What are we saying yes to? What are the trade-offs? And now can we orchestrate the entire business to go forth with this, knowing that there could be additional risks, some pushback, etc. So did that sort of get at it, Connor?
I think that's dead on. And yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that because there are fundamentals that are getting missed in the hype cycle, and you're dead on. I think, as Stu, unless you had a take on that, I was like the change management, the executive sponsorship, knowing what the outcome you want and measuring it.
So let's talk about like why. So Bermuda Triangle is a great analogy. I agree. I also thought that was something I was going to have to worry a lot more about as an adult. So I'm glad that's not an issue that I'm facing on a daily basis, because at 12 I was very worried. So I look at how you run a successful team or a business, right? Like you have to have a clear direction, a goal, and you need to be able to articulate that in its most simplest form. Now, who do you think does this better? A threat actor group or an enterprise leadership team in a mid-tier company, right? A threat acting, like a threat actors know exactly where they need to go.
This.
Yes.
I know. Here's some data. 40% of projects on this hand are getting canceled. These guys are attacking 30 different companies at the same time. That's my data.
They know exactly where they need to get to, right? And it is really clear, hey, this is our outcome. If you look at most companies in corporate America, like they actually don't objectively know what they're trying to do. And the best ones, they have a really clear mission and they go and do it, right? Like hate or love Elon Musk, SpaceX had a very clear vision. Tesla had a very clear vision and they worked really hard to get there. And it was just, this is the direction, we're going to get there. You break a few eggs, but you get there. Most companies don't have that clear of a mission or a direction. And so they spend so long and they don't really know where they're getting to. I think the other thing I would add is there is a huge amount of corporate America that is puppeteered by consulting companies. And if why would you want, like if I'm McKinsey, Bain, Accenture, like PwC, whoever I am, why would I want the AI project to work, right? Like there is no, like, because then I'm not that useful.
That's pretty tinfoil hat, though. I like that. Okay.
So, I mean, look, like watch House of Lies. It's the most wonderful TV show ever. It's about consulting, and they don't make any money if things get fixed, right? And that is like obviously it's a very harsh outlook, but I see, hey, let's go in this direction. Okay, we're shifting in this direction. And that's what, like, at the end of the day, people run out of patience and there are a lot of projects started. And I've worked for companies where you just start so many projects and nothing gets executed because it's shiny thing. And if you look at, someone said the other week, like the speed of AI, it might have been you, Connor. It was someone on this show. Probably the percentages say it was probably you, but the speed of AI is a thing. Like people are they don't complete anything because they're like, 2 weeks, we're going to do everything in Claude. And now we're check out Lovable. And no one actually follows up because everything is so new and shiny. And it goes back to like change management, right? Which is a tale as old of time. We've had issues since moving to the cloud, ERP implementations, moving out of the cloud, compliant. Like people are crap at change. Like businesses are crap at change. And you also look at people digging in to save their own. Daniel Meester talked about this, right? Like a lot of people there are not a huge amount of motivation to fix things because then they become irrelevant. And a lot of people are very nervous to do that. So why do we want the AI project to work? Like, what does that mean for me? And that is a real fear that people have. But threat actors could give a shit and they're full speed ahead. And it is a very terrifying middle ground that we're in, that we are not arming ourselves to protect, or at least a lot of businesses are not arming ourselves to protect, when on the other side, I don't think they're getting a reduction in budget this year.
Yes, that's fair. So that Daniel Miesler episode, for those of you who are listening to this, go back and listen to that because he talked about a few things in there and it's basically all horrifying.
Yeah,
but the big thing, if you gave corporate America a red button that said, push this button and I will give you the goals you have and we're going to collapse the company into one person you achieve, like people wouldn't hit that button. He has a really articulate answer, thesis of why we don't hit that button.
Scary.
Yeah, what's also interesting about all of this, well, one, I am a former management consultant myself, so I appreciate you saying what you did, but actually what I'm seeing is that many of them are losing business. So they've lost a ton. I don't think they have the same grasp that they used to because AI is replacing efficiency, because most tools can, if they can't build your own slides in Google Slides, they can build your PowerPoint that then you can upload to Google Slides. So there's a lot like that value is decreasing. But I think to your point, decision making at the upper levels in a lot of these companies is not happening. And the easiest course wins. And something you also alluded to is this idea of like, well, I'm not going to fix this, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to bring my tools. So all those legacy tools, they can still stick around. Okay, now extra risk, like extra
Gosh.
stuff in your stack that could easily be hacked because now no longer anyone's paying attention to it. But now I'm going to bring on these other new tools. And then as soon as I get fired, the next guy is going to bring our gals bring on their new tools. So I see a lot of that as well, this sort of shiny object manifesting in all kinds of ways. And then of course, the people on the other side of the vendors dealing, and like leaders like me dealing with churn, dealing with contraction, because it's like executive sponsor just got fired.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. The likelihood of them going with a different tool is real.
I guess it's a great segue to like how you view churn and customer retention now versus like 5 years ago before the cat came out the bag with ChatGPT. Like, are you seeing a pretty like fast evolution in terms of how quickly people are to change products now or add products, like compared to what the good old, well, not the good old days, but like kind of pre the launch of ChatGPT?
Yeah, I mean, Connor and I talked about this a little bit over the last couple of months. Number one, everyone in every segment. So I work with, yes, B2B SaaS cyber, but I also work with B2B SaaS legal, B2B SaaS finance and fintech, B2B SaaS, everything that's sort of support, customer success, go to market, flavored new products, like a lot of them AI, a lot of them either native AI or building in new AI products to their core SaaS products. And across the board, customers are just cutting. And they will come up and say, hey, I just got hired. I have to cut 25 million from my budget. Sorry, guys, like you're part of that. And most vendors don't really know what to do. And so I always come back to how quickly can you get deployed? Connor, you and I talked about this. So like what is fastest time to value, or time to first value, as I call it? And then how sticky can you become in their environment? So not only are you reducing pain, but if they were to rip you out, that pain would be way too much to actually go forth and do it. And I don't think enough customers or I'd say vendors are focused on what is that moment of time to first value, and then what is that adoption, usage, stickiness cycle so that you're embedded in their workflows. Speaking of change management, you now have workflows built around you and your tool, and that the pain of losing you is way too great.
Could you just maybe expand on just that idea that I'm really intrigued, this time to first value? Because that's a slightly different one that I usually hear when I read about it. It's always time to value. And you're describing something that's a little more specific there. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so I've actually been nerding out to this recently a bunch as I rethink some of these core CS metrics that have been so passe. Stuart, you mentioned the heydays, and now we're not in the heyday anymore. So I look back at all of the sort of overwrought customer success metrics that are a waste of time now. And so I'm really thinking about 3 that don't have formal names yet, but I'm in this process of brainstorming. So if you have ideas, I'm all for it. The first one, known as time to first value, but I'm also calling like your ignition metric, is like, what is that first thing? You put the key in the ignition and you turn the key. The engine is now on. What is that? What is the first use case that you should solve with a new tool? That's that like aha moment. Okay,
Yeah,
now
the light bulb.
yeah. And sorry, I have an old school Camry. So like for me, it's like you still have to take a key and put it in an ignition.
Best car in America.
Now, I want to hear the other
Japanese.
2, but I want to say why I love that imagery you just shared, because the time to first value, where you put the key in the ignition, if the car sputters, you don't have a lot of confidence in that car. If it roars to life, you have a lot more confidence in that. You start to build trust with it. I think that's so. So far, I love this brainstorming session. Yes, continue. That's a great.
First of all, I have the meme, which is the Anakin Skywalker one in episode 1, where he goes, "It's working" on the pod racer.
There you go.
There's the one.
There we go. I see. I knew I'd be like
It's all
coming
about
on.
memes. It's all about the memes.
And so then 2, for lack of a better term, I'm calling this stickiness metric until I get something better. Note that the stickiness metric is not the happiness metric. They may not like you, but they know they need you. And I honestly think that's more important. Yes, I would love to have happy customers all the time, but I'd rather have customers that need me and need the product that I'm selling, or need the product that my clients are selling.
That's the Stuart Mitchell metric. They might not like it, but they need you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Done. There you go. Well,
it's the Batman. It's not the hero you want. It's the hero you need. You can call it the Batman.
See, here we go in the memes. I'm taking this. Yeah.
Look at this.
And then, and that one is one where these days no one has patience for like, wait, to get me the telemetry, wait to give me the dashboard in 3 months. No, I want live updates every click I make to tell me what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and how it's making my environment safer, how it's mitigating all of these future, attackers, how it's protecting me from ransomware, whatever your metric is. Show me every day, every minute that your tool is making me better, safer, smarter, wealthier, whatever it is. And then the third one is a more formal ROI metric. But Connor, you and I talked about, like, you can't just build an ROI slide and be like, peace. I think there's a lot more of this asking the right questions up front. What are you motivated by? Why did you buy us? Where is the budget coming from? And then who on your side needs to approve the budget? Let's bring those folks into the conversation, and let's be thoughtful about the people that are in procurement, in finance, who are responsible for cutting costs, how to bring them into the fold of the benefits and the financial benefits of keeping this tool in line.
So I want to take these three, this concept here, and I want to bring it over to the house of the CISO, where they're either selling internally or for companies who are building software, there's building security software, they're selling to their customers and bringing that in. So I think this is really interesting. But I have one specific question before we transition. And that was, if I had to force you to pick a number, hours, days, weeks, what do you think the patience is for the enterprises for when they say, we've bought the thing and now we want to see that dashboard. Now we want to see the first signs of life, that second metric that you had here, where they can clearly see, okay, yep, we need you. This is the metric. This is the dashboard that's updating every day. This is the workflow. This is the principal use case. Do you think people have the patience for the first 90 days, which measuring in weeks? What's your sense when you're working with the customers? Do you have quite a variety of customers that you are helping and supporting and companies you're helping and supporting? If you had to pick a number.
Say, if you asked me this a year ago, the standard metric about a year ago was for SMB customers under 30 days, mid-market customers under 60 days, and 90 days plus for enterprise accounts. Now, I'd say it's thrown out the window. I think there's still, most enterprises assume it's going to take a long time. But, and I was just talking about this with a client yesterday, even if it takes a long time and in their heads they've budgeted 5 months for deployment, they will still blame you if it takes 5 months for deployment, and they will pull the plug and say implementation sucked. It's your fault. And so I have to keep teaching people, they're still going to blame us. So we can't allow for 5 months of deployment. We have to set expectations up front. So now to answer your question, Connor, I think with AI tools today and all of the sort of the native stuff, it's a day. It's maybe a week. At least that's the patience that I see. And we'll get into CISOs and their own patience. But I'd say no one has time for that.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate you giving us a number of that, because I think that's right. I was like, when I worked with my teams and we were like deploy the next cloud, deploying some cloud security technology or deploying something to protect our APIs, you kind of expect to be done that day. You kind of want to walk up at 9 a.m. and you expect by the time you log off, we got our first use case out the door. That was my expectation. Right or wrong, that was my internal expectation. So let's talk about that for a second. So let's talk about specifically selling security here. One of the things I see when we look around, you don't have to look far, whether it's the FAIR Institute's reports or you're looking at Gartner, we see the same thing, right? CEOs still are going to rank cybersecurity as one of their top external risks, but they're, of course, going to be primarily focused on growth, supply chain management, AI adoption, managing the market, and so much. And so we're at the place now, I think, where cybersecurity is clearly expected to be baked in. It's kind of a necessary condition for achieving these other goals, right? You must pass through security to get to the goal you want to get to, but it's not the primary objective. One of the things I found interesting was in some recent reports from the FAIR Institute, they were showing that 62% of the CFOs that were surveyed say that they are consuming the cyber risk information that their leadership's putting out. But only 6% of the business units and product leaders were regularly consuming that data. So there's definitely this disconnect where, like, as a CISO, you might put through that dashboard, you might send out report to like ELT@organization.com, and there's one person on the team who's going to read it, which is your CFO or your chief risk officer, your risk-oriented executives. But your growth-oriented executives, not so much. So I guess, AFK, my question to you would be, if you're advising and giving counsel to security leaders to sell internally, or again, maybe it's different or same, but other leadership at companies who are selling security to the market, what separates those who win those who are getting heard, the ones succeeding, they're getting funded either internally or externally, versus the ones who are just getting a polite nod and then getting ghosted?
Yeah, first, can I ask a hot take? Can I ask for a friend? So, and I've been dying to ask you guys on this podcast, which is CISO. How is that pronounced?
CISO.
Okay, great question. There is only, and I'm going to totally steal this. There is only one way to pronounce the CISO, CISO, CISO. Everyone else is CISO. I don't know where they got that from. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. This is so important because even recently, a bunch of my CISO friends were like, AFK, you don't have a computer science background, so you, of course, are going to call it CISOs. But those of us with comp sci, where it's CISO, everyone knows that. And I was like, I don't know.
I think there's a distinct age difference that separates this.
Yes, correct.
I think there's it depends on where you are from an age bracket, you'll say it differently.
Okay.
Are we getting sued, Connor?
Totally. And
do we have to let a disclaimer
mine
out?
is authoritative. I'm going to stake this. This is Connor's worldview here. So there you go.
CISO.
Okay, so this is hilarious, but I feel much better about this. So, Connor, one, you and I have talked about sort of the various profiles of CISOs before, and the fact that they often get marginalized, put aside. So, like, all risk and bad stuff gets attached to them, but all benefits and good stuff gets attached to the sales leader or to the finance leader or to the CEO. Like, that's just sort of how it goes. I think the ones that are more proactively willing to work across, so the term I use is your first team. So if you're in the C-suite and they ask you who your first team is, the common misnomer is to answer, well, I'm the CISO, it's the security team. That's my first team. And my answer is, your first team are your peers at all of the other departments. So your first team is the C-suite. It is the CMO, the CRO, chief customer, finance, CEO, et cetera. And I think a lot of us, I mean, I've made these faults in my career as well, like tend to just sort of go inward to our team, to our responsibilities, to what our people have to be doing, as opposed to helping our peers understand implications and working across that first team. And so that's where I'd say the CISOs who do that well, and then either buy the right tool or have expectations of the tool that they buy, or on the selling side, are able to say, hey, which narrative do you want to hear? Because I can tell this narrative to anyone. Do you want to help your brand? Let's bring in the CMO. Do you want to save dollars and spend more and gain even more? New logos and existing logos? CRO. You want to understand how this is going to benefit your bottom line? Let's go. Do you want to talk about compliance and risk mitigation? Great. But they are able to understand the motivation and the challenges of their peers and speak in the language that benefits them. And that, to me, is a transformative CISO, someone who goes outside their lane and helps the rest of the company understand that their work is critical to everyone.
I would add to that. I completely agree. I think a lot of CISOs are very play the victim very well, right? Like, oh, I'm hired here, no one's empowering me. Like, I don't get to whether it's a reporting issue, a budget issue. I have a very clear outlook on life, and it might be a little bit fun. Everything is your fault, right? Like, no one's coming to help. Like, I learned that very early in my career. Like, no one's coming to help. So you make do and you work with your peers. You add value. You show up. You go above and beyond versus going, I didn't get the budget, or I didn't, that's for me, it's a communication issue. It's a internal PR issue. You go back to the point about if 6% of people are reading the reports that you write, the reports you write are probably shit. Like, that is a fairly firm, if no one's reading it, you are not reading, either it's not concise, it's not interesting, it's not useful, or your delivery is not good, right? Like, if my team only read 1 in 20 of the emails that I was sending to them, that's a me problem. That's not a them problem. That's a me problem. And so I think we're very good at going, the company only hired me because of security theater, etc. Like, there is a part of that, right? A lot of CISOs are not necessarily hired to be this heroic CISO that comes and adds value to revenue or, image for the business. Like, some are, but most are like, hey, do this, keep us out the news. But the great ones find a way. Like, that is my perspective, is the great ones find a way. Like, I was with a CISO of a very good company who have some play into security yesterday. he's like, because of his network and who he is, he helps with sales, right? Like he's the CISO, they're selling a product, but some CISOs are like, oh, I don't get involved in the sales process. And it's like, cool, you wonder why you're shunned when it comes to you going above and beyond. You don't do it, but you want everyone to go above and beyond for you. It's actually quite selfish. And I think, like, to your point, AFK, your peers are not the security engineers, but like there is comfort in speaking to your people because it's easy and it's the language that you grew up in for the most part. But there is that kind of like, you need to be adding value above and beyond your role. And I think there was a wonderful, it was either a podcast or like a show, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was the old CISO of Levi's jeans company, right? And it's, how does my security program help me sell more jeans? And in your most basic thought process, that should be every CISO's role. How is my job making the company better? But everyone's too busy looking at NIST frameworks to give a shit about the company. And it is not the strategy. That will only get you so far.
Steve is a great guy.
Steve is a great guy. I'm glad I didn't dream this article up.
So, okay, just want to underscore something you said there. And I think what you gave us and everyone listening to this is a framework by which to have permission to show up differently. And that was the idea, who is your first team? Just wanted to underscore that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that framing, because if you think as I heard what you were saying, if I believe that my first team is my security apparatus, and it really is just that mission, then you by definition are inwardly facing. Like, how are my directors doing? How are my managers helping? Are my KPIs where they need to be? So there's kind of like, there's always going to be this disconnect, versus if you're truly a CISO, you are going to be an executive in a company and you're going to drive that company to achieve its goals. Full stop. And that language of the first team, I think, is really important, because then that completely reframes everything. And it allows you to say, in some cases, yeah, we're good enough over here. Or actually, we really wanted to achieve this particular thing because it directs, now I know how to tie my security team and my dollars and my time to helping achieve that product launch, whatever the case may be. I really think that's an insightful point there. So thank you for raising that.
I will add a very small anecdote from the same person I was with yesterday. And this is where I see like true difference makers. It's 2026 budget season, right? It sounds weird to say 2026. It sounds like a fictional year, but it's real. And they were talking about budgets, and he's like, I'm like, how's it looking? He's like, almost too good. And he's like, okay, well, we've got a lot of projects that need to get done. And he's like, they've greenlit everything and they want me to do this also. And he's like, I'm actually going to say no to some of this budget that's being given, because what does that say to the CTO and the VP of sales? And then there's a fairness issue. Most CISOs, like, I don't know many CISOs that would say, like, they're like, oh, my budget, I can do a really good job and I can make myself look great. This CISO is going, hey, let's redeploy that capital fairly across the other leadership functions. I will take this project 75% of the way and I'll prioritize these 3 projects. I don't know many security leaders that think like that. They're like, I need my budget to get us 100% secure. But let's say you got 97% secure and quadrupled your sales team, which enabled, like, upped your stock price. That is ultimately better from what's best for the business versus scribbling away what's yours. And I don't think that happens very often, mostly because, again, to your point, AFK, they're thinking about their team, not their team, which is the leadership team and the stock price and the shareholders.
And Stu, I would say that person you're having lunch with yesterday or hanging out with yesterday, that's the difference between being a security leader and an organizational leader, an organizational executive. And that person was clearly in the executive headspace.
Yeah. And I'll just say, what the challenges and the opportunities that you just shared in that story are not unique to CISOs, unfortunately. I get called in to help CCOs, chief customer officers, and VPs of CS all the time, because same thing. They're like, ooh, more headcount, more money, yay, go. And I'm like, hey, have you talked to the head of product? And maybe you want to take that funding, make it so that we've upgraded our product roadmap next quarter to solve for these 2 bugs and these 2 fabulous new feature requests. And guess what? That's going to renew 20 million in AR right there. So save the headcount, improve the roadmap, everyone wins. And again, another example of outside the box thinking, being really creative, being really thoughtful about your peers and the benefits, as opposed to like just sort of turning inward and shying away from the hard things.
So changing teams from your first team being your security to your first team being the executive team with your peer group really is a change in framing on how we show up as leaders. So, with that, I want to talk about changing your branding as well and how we see ourselves and how security leaders should be thinking about it. So, I want to get both your perspectives on this. I think you both do this really naturally and do this really well. So, when I look at CISOs and security leaders right now, there's very much a narrative of that you need your own voice. You don't have to go far, right? Whether you're looking at Avanta's New York CISO agenda for the recent thing they just did, it was all about driving ideas into a leadership vision that supports resiliency and personal growth. None of that was about security, right? That was all about branding and presence, not tool choice, not frameworks, not strategy. InfoSec world was basically the same thing. We see these things reoccurring, all these events. I think they have their own talk track on like learning how to do public speaking and panels on thought leadership. So with that, it appears that the people who are getting invited to be part of that team that we were describing, where they are truly part of the executive team, they're truly helping the business grow. The people who are invited to these future roles and the board seats and advisory work, they seem to be the ones who I would say like know how to show their work online. Like they're publishing, they're speaking, they're running podcasts, obviously, and they really know how to do frontline stories and tie those security stories to business outcomes. AFK, I want to start with you, and this too, I want to get your take on this. How do we for leaders who might be nervous about this kind of sense of self-promotion or like the spotlight's a little too bright on them, what can they be doing or how can they shift their thinking such that they get out from behind the curtain and they do get online, they choose a platform of choice or choose stage of choice to start practicing being more of a public presence? And do you agree that's a good thing?
I think I'm going to say I'm mixed on this. And I'll explain why in a minute. And I'll also lead by being very vulnerable, which is I'm not very good at promoting my brand. And I don't really like to be on stages in front of others on videos. I shared with Connor last week that like being on a podcast is a little scary for me. I like talking to people, but I don't like to promote myself or my work. And one of the words I hate is authenticity, although I feel the need to use it right now, which is that I find that the people who I read and trust the most, and maybe the people who have helped me build my voice, are the ones that sound truly themselves, offer real takes, and show consistency. I mean, we often talk about what builds trust. Consistency builds trust. And when you're receiving different hot takes, but you generally know the direction of the person you're reading on LinkedIn or following on whatever platform, you want to know directionally where they're coming from. And you want to know that it's not fully written by AI. Their takes are their real takes. They're human, like some of us are. And that they're not in it for shameless self-promotion. So you usually need someone like a CMO friend of mine sort of came and kicked my ass and was like, AFK, you got to get your opinions out there. And I was like, no, I don't want to do any of that shit. And she was like, yeah, no, you actually have to do it. And so I've tried to cultivate the sort of my two-sided voice, which is a little bit spicy, a little bit bad humor, and a lot of generosity and kindness and trying to make the world a little bit better, that mixture. And so when I speak, it's going to be one of those three things or a mixture of those three things. And it also aligns to why founders call me. If they want a yes man or a yes woman, I'm not the person they're going to call. Founders know, and my referral network know, that the only people who call me, and I'm fortunate to have more than I can do right now, are the people who want truth, who are seeking to look around corners, who want to know the hard things so that they can fix them, rather than the ones who are like, yeah, you're doing great. Go, go, go. That's not me. I mean, yeah, I'll encourage you along, but I will also point out the challenges and work with you to fix those challenges. So I would say for the CISOs out there that may be mixed on self-promotion or may have the same sort of, do I sound authentic? I would think about your friends and families and colleagues and the things that they like about your voice. Ask them, what are the things that they appreciate about what you post in Slack one day, or how you message someone, or how you think about it. And then I also find that the people in the sweet spot, and I think both of you have this, and I'm not just kissing your ass so I can come back, I promise, is this idea of being able to talk in the language of different people and maintain credibility and respect. To be super technical and talk to technical folks and maintain integrity and respect. And then to talk to non-technical folks, find a way of not going way over their heads and then being able to have a really good conversation that aligns with them. So it's about that balance. I promise I'll stop talking. It's a balance between knowing your audience adapting to your audience and knowing yourself and staying true to yourself.
So there's a lot to unpack in there. I thank you for sharing this. There's a lot of really good insights in that. Also, key takeaway, find yourself a CMO friend to kick you in the ass. That seems like a catalyst here. So one thing that concerns me with the advice that you gave, though, is you said, talk to your friends and family and see what they like about your voice. I tell my son a story every night before he goes to bed. And he came to me and said, Daddy, when you talk to me, my brain goes fuzzy. That's like, all right. So that's my friends and family love about.
That is non-technical audiences. We need to work on that. I am probably a little more comfortable with self-promotion, as you may have seen on LinkedIn. This is my world, right? I do operate a lot here, and it's something I wasn't initially, and it's something I became more comfortable with. The one thing I would say is the more people that know you, the more accountable you are to the entire world, and you hang yourself out to dry in public. That consistency is important. The one thing I would say is I do think we live in a world where just being good at your job is not good enough anymore. It's an unfair thing to say, but we live in a marketing-led society. And people don't want to buy what they don't know, right? So you could be an incredibly credible security leader, CMO, whatever it may be. And if no one knows who you are and what you are, that's a little concerning in today's society, right? Like some companies will not hire if the person is not on LinkedIn. I think it's probably a little more important than we gave credit to in your initial point, AFK, is being kind and generous. And it doesn't have to be like overly nice, but I look at the people who have used their voice and platform and gotten the most out of it. And it is the people who have continued to show up for other people and be generous, be helpful with their content. I mean, I look at like Carl Mattson is a great example of like one of the darlings of the security industry, friend of the podcast. He's incredibly generous with his time. He is incredibly generous with his voice, and he has used his platform actually not to self-promote, but to help others, which in turn has done absolute wonders for himself. And I think if you are useful to other people and seek to be valuable in some type of way versus doing it for your own gain and clicks. And I see those folks too. But I think the people who are, I think Connor, you almost mentioned like an inner circle or whatever of folks. There's some people that get invited to the party because they're attached to the right brand. That's always it's the cool kids in school, right? Like that's just, if you work for Anthropic as a security leader right now, you're probably going to get invited to talk on security and AI or OpenAI or whatever. But people who are very generous and a connector and kind and selfless and, again, consistent with their voice and seemingly human, probably human, they're the people who have access to more rooms and opportunity than those who are like, there's a spiciness, but there's also some people who are just like not very nice. Like that is a real thing. And they come online and there's either a holier than thou, or there is just some people who like to make themselves feel big by making other people feel small. And like those people don't get like it, everyone has a bad day. And I don't like, I realize that everyone's allowed to blow up every now and then. The world is a stressful place and that's okay. But the people who are consistently belittling of people or a profession or an idea or a thesis, like those people do not get the right types of following. And that's the other thing. When you put yourself out online, as much as you can make yourself loved, you can make yourself hated too. And so it's an interesting place. So as much as you might be opening doors, if you're an asshole, you might shut more doors than you open. There might be some people who are best set to shut up. But I do think being thoughtful and kind, it's a skill that is never going to disappear and it's always going to come around, I think.
That, and I'll just say, Connor, one of the +1 to everything you just said, Stuart. And what I really believe is if the only thing you do is find diamonds in the rough and amplify the voices of others, that is fucking incredible. Like that's what we should all be doing. And it benefits the whole ecosystem.
I love that. And then, so we're about to change into our last segment of the show tonight, which we call our Monday morning quarterback, or our Monday morning encouragement. But one thing I just want to leave on this topic here is, as a security leader, if you're feeling on the fence about making these changes, find a way to step into it. And if you think about the brand that you build over time, it doesn't have to be rah-rah, but what it can do is be really helpful when you have a very rainy day. So specifically, if you think of like Joe Sullivan, when he was brought through trial, or we think about Tim Brown going in front of the SEC. These were well-known security leaders who had been predictable through their career in their generosity, in their kindness, in their perspective. And I think so when they were being pulled through what was probably the worst parts of their profession ever go through, there was a whole community of people who said, actually, I know how these people act because I've seen them do it for the last 15 years. I have a point of view. And then you saw people pouring out. There were hundreds, if not thousands of people who wrote
writing judges,
letters of character attestments, for Joe Sullivan. And so I think there's kind of that angle too, where it can actually help you. It can't hurt to be good to people loudly online.
It can't hurt to ever just be good to people. It doesn't matter, loudly, quietly, just
Well said.
be good to people.
All right, so let's get into our Monday morning advice then. So, AFK, so what we do is we're going to go around the horn. Everyone's going to give if you're listening to us over the weekend, you're like me, you're mowing the lawn, and then you're like, this is what I'm going to do when I get on my desk on Monday. This was the Monday morning advice is. So, Stu, I'll start with you. AFK, I'll go to you, and then I'll close us out. So, Stu, what advice do you have for the security leaders who are listening to the show tonight?
It's an obvious one this week, which is if you're going to record a podcast, just make sure that you have top quality internet connection.
That is a joke that'll be edited out by the time this goes to production. Yep, agreed with that one.
There we go. AFK.
I mean, I was going to go make sure you trust your plumber.
It's the Connor Sherman special.
There you go.
I think a couple things I'll pull on from the threads of this week, which is it's making mistakes isn't the problem. It's how you recover from the mistakes that shows your true character. And so when confronting or being confronted with an outage, a challenge, rise to the occasion. Show people what you're truly made of. Lead with vulnerability, lead with transparency, admit wrongdoing, and then take action. And that is how you recover and build long-lasting relationships with people, with your customers, with folks throughout your network.
I love that. That is incredibly good advice. I don't know if mine's going to follow, but here's mine for everyone who's listening. On the topic of branding, if you don't know where to start, I encourage you to explore designing a minimal viable voice. So think about that as you're an executive or a leader. What is your minimal viable voice going to be? For example, it might be one quarterly public piece. It might be a reoccurring internal forum. It might be an external community touch point. It might be that you pick one Slack channel that you're in as a CISO, and you're just going to every day say something to somebody in a positive way. What is going to be your minimal viable voice? And that can help you start in your building of your public brand. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap the show. AFK, thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those who are listening, a reminder, AFK is a fractional CCO and an executive advisor with close to 2 decades of experience in the B2B SaaS, cybersecurity, and go-to-market strategy. She advises CEOs, the C-suite leaders, and startup founders on operationalizing and scaling customer experiences, driving retention, and building these post-sale organizations that fuel innovation, revenue, and growth of revenue. So, AFK, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It has been a total pleasure. You guys are the best.
Thanks for coming on.
And if you like what you heard today, please follow Zero Signal on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. You'll be joining the host of people on Apple Review who are giving us 5-star reviews. Yes, go check them out. That is live of this week. Now, share this episode with a colleague. I will ask you, please text this to a friend, put it on LinkedIn. It means the world to us. It helps us build a community, and we'd love to hear from you. Please tag Stu and I, share your thoughts on the conversation today, and send us a note in what you might want us to cover next time. All right. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of Zero Signal.